Are you stuck in a painful loop with a narcissist and can't figure out why you can't leave? This video will explain the cycle that's trapping you and how to break free. Hey everyone, it's me, and welcome back to this channel on narcissism. So we're going to talk again about narcissistic relationships. And one thing that is at the heart of narcissistic relationships that is really important for folks to understand is that there is a cycle to these relationships. And there are patterns in these relationships that keep people stuck in them. And one of those patterns is called trauma bonding. It's something that is a real phenomenon. It's not just something that people say. People get trauma bonded to their abusers. So let's break that down today. Let's take it apart. I also have a free guide for you called the Narcissist Recovery Starter Kit. Link in the description below. If you're new here, please subscribe. We'd love to have you join this community and share this information out. Trauma bonding is not something that is easily explained. If you ever watch any of those TV shows like, Dirty John or The Vow, these kinds of shows on HBO or Netflix or whatever it is that describe cult memberships, these kinds of high-level, charismatic, but dangerous leaders who have followers, there's a whole concept around trauma bonding within cults. But narcissistic relationships are also a form of a high-conflict, destructive relationship that can result in trauma bonding. There's a sort of a definition of trauma bonding. Trauma bonds are formed when a person experiences a cycle of abuse over time, where they are emotionally manipulated by the abuser through a series of cycles, which include tension building followed by a period of release, or in some cases a release that feels like a major reward. So what we're talking about in terms of narcissistic relationships is a cycle. And in fact, cyclical abuse is another term for this. And the cycle looks something like this. It's the way it starts. There's a buildup. There's tension being built up. Maybe the narcissist is getting ready to go out, and they're picking an outfit, and you're commenting on it, and they're raging about it. Or maybe you're doing something, and they start criticizing you, or devaluing you, or dismissing you. Or they may be engaging in some manipulative tactics. It's like telling you things to make you doubt yourself. They might be telling you that you're remembering things wrong, or gaslighting you, or maybe you feel like they're sort of being cold or dismissive to you, or not paying attention to you, or maybe withholding affection. These are all ways that the tension builds. After the tension builds, then comes the kind of moment of crisis, or a peak. And after the peak, there's a calm or a lull or a resolution. And the resolution or the lull can come in two ways. It can come in the form of them giving you what you need. So maybe you're someone who has been devalued and criticized and belittled, and you finally speak up, and then they tell you how wonderful you are and how right you are, or they bring you some flowers, or they bring you some expensive perfume or cologne, or they do something nice for you. That can be part of the cycle where the narcissist gives you something so that you feel as though you got your needs met. And then that sets up the next cycle. Or the resolution to this cycle can happen because they drop it, they walk away, they stop responding, they become less interested. You don't know what you did wrong. This is not uncommon in intermittent reinforcement schedules. If you have a dog and you're trying to teach the dog a trick, and you only sometimes give them, it's a treat when they do the trick, but not every time. That becomes very confusing for the dog, and it's actually a very effective way of training. It's not the best way, but people who are in these kinds of relationships, the narcissist will often do that. They'll drop it, they'll walk away, they'll disengage. You won't know what hit you, and that can also set up the next cycle. Sometimes the resolution happens because they get punished. So maybe you put some boundaries in place. Maybe you tell them that you're leaving, or maybe you call them out on their bad behavior, or you fight back against them. And if they get punished, they may respond by becoming nicer, or more responsive, or more loving to you. Or they may punish you, and then that sets up the next cycle. The point is, there's a cycle of tension building. There's a peak, and there's a resolution. And the resolution can look different ways. Sometimes the resolution doesn't happen, and the cycle keeps building and building and building. Then the next cycle begins, and the tension starts building again. And the pattern keeps repeating itself over and over and over again. Now, you can see how this cycle, the pattern of the cycle, would result in trauma bonding. Remember, trauma bonding is associated with feeling like you have to have them, but you also fear them. You both want them and you fear them. May even vacillate between wanting them and fearing them. That's what trauma bonding is. This cycle of tension building and then release, whether the release comes from them giving you something or dropping it or walking away or you punishing them and them changing their behavior, that can result in a trauma bond because the cycle keeps repeating itself and you're living in this chronic state of anxiety. And that chronic state of anxiety activates dysregulation in our nervous system. When we're living in that state, our higher order thinking goes down, and we're more likely to stay in relationships, even if we know they're bad for us, because that's the only state that we know. In fact, it's not even that you're in a bad relationship. That's your relationship. You don't know anything else. And because you don't know anything else, you may even rationalize that this is normal. And then the cycles keep repeating. And with each cycle, you may actually get worse at recognizing the red flags or the warning signs. Or you may even try harder to meet the needs of the other person, hoping that you can prevent the tension building because you do not want to get to that crisis point. In narcissistic relationships, especially the malignant kind, it gets worse because there's no remorse, there's no empathy, there's no accountability. They don't change. They don't get better. And in fact, the cycles may get worse over time, which means you're living in a chronic state of anxiety that's getting worse over time. You can see why people would get trauma bonded to these relationships and these individuals, because the pattern keeps repeating itself and the anxiety and the stress are at such a high level. Now, sometimes people experience multiple traumas in their lives and they develop a trauma bond with their first trauma, but it gets worse with subsequent traumas. So you can imagine if somebody has a family of origin where there was this kind of cyclical abuse going on, and then they get into a friendship or a romantic relationship where there is cyclical abuse and they start to feel like, oh, I know this feeling, I know this dance. It can be really confusing and distressing for a person. And sometimes in therapy, we'll hear people talk about a traumatic bond. And if somebody says that to you, you can respond by saying, well, that sounds like you have developed a trauma bond with this person. Because the behavior is repeating itself and you feel like you have to have this person, but you're also fearful of them. It's very important for people to recognize that these kinds of cycles exist, and that it's normal for people who are in these kinds of high conflict relationships to get trauma bonded to them. But it's also important for people to recognize that trauma bonding doesn't mean that you have to stay in the relationship. Trauma bonding means that you're having a reaction to chronic stress. Think about animals who live in abusive situations. Animals also develop trauma bonds. And what we know is that when animals are living in abusive situations, they can still be saved, they still can be rescued, and they still can heal. So just because you've developed a trauma bond to a person does not mean that you're fated to be in that. It's a relationship forever, and that there's no hope for you to get out of it. Ready to start healing? Download your free Narcissist Recovery Starter Kit, your first step to breaking trauma bonds and reclaiming your self-worth. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for weekly tools and support to help you heal from narcissistic abuse. Trauma bonding is something that can be overcome, but it does mean that you need to do some deep work to understand what it is you're reacting to, and to find other sources of regulation and stabilization in your life. Thanks again for watching. See you in the next one.